if we take the currency out of this, and we look at the technologies, you're talking about a mechanism for ensuring authenticity. Well, suddenly authenticity is on a lot of people's minds because we recognize that we're like hours away from deep fakes that are so good that you can't detect them by looking at, the direction of the shadows and the stuff that we used to be able to do to figure out whether a photograph was for real. So,
So Devon used to be a compositor before we got into this industry. He was working in the entertainment industry. And so I like to say, like, he's the reason that photos no longer hold up in court, right? Because he could create images that were photorealistic. You would totally believe.
And we would look at things like which direction are the shadows coming from. Like that kind of stuff was really important. And getting it right means you can go to a movie and actually have the suspension of disbelief. And that same exact person or technology can do it to make fakes on the web. So it's been around for 20 or 30 years.
But the thing is that it took
faster now, way faster.
It took an enormous team of compositors to make images that didn't really exist to look believable, right? You had to have a tremendous amount of resources. And now you don't have to anymore, or you won't have to very soon. The AI is not quite there yet. The sixth finger and stuff is usually a pretty good giveaway, right?
Better. I think they just solved for the hands recently.
It's getting better and better. And when we first saw this, I think it was in like 2019, Devon was like, wow, I cannot believe it. This is so exciting. The kind of filmmaking that's going to come out of this is just, he was just like giddy. I was horrified because because I'm a woman and I had just an innate understanding of the way that this technology could be used to hurt me, where, you've seen celebrities kind of have these deep faked images of them naked, doing disgusting things, whatever. I know Anita Sarkeesian from college, and so I just was like, oh, this is going to put this down onto a level where it's going to apply to everyday people. It's not just going to apply to celebrities, that something like this could happen to you. And then all of a sudden people are going to be looking at you sideways as if those images, you had participated in the creation of those images. It's just, I don't know, it gets me kind of flustered still. So we actually made a video about this to illustrate this problem. And I got a friend of mine to shoot some kind of like sexy bikini footage, and Devon comped my face onto her body just to show, like, to give people a visual image of like, this is a threat to all of us. And it's a threat that's like very real at this point now with where we are in the progression of things. And so that takes us to the cryptography element, the authenticity element. And
before you get there, I want to say, first of all, you guys showed me that video years ago. I guess this would have been pre-COVID, am I right?
Yeah, before COVID,
yeah.
I think it was right before COVID. I'm still slightly disturbed by it. Right?
I am too. I had to make it.
Right. Well, even worse for you. But yeah, and I think the point is, my conscious mind understands that this was done to prove a point, right? But some part of me has this disturbing image of my friend Amy, and it's like, that hazard is going to become ubiquitous because the tool that is going to allow you to generate this is going to be so low effort that people are going to create every video that serves to hurt somebody they don't like or that they get off on or whatever they're going to do. Exactly. And the point is, that's a frightening world to live in, right?
Well, and to impact geopolitical events. The Pentagon bombing a couple of weeks ago that caused $500 billion of market cap to be briefly lost. That's dramatic. I mean, in that case, it's absurd that anyone reacted that way because it wasn't even in the shape of a Pentagon. It had all those artifacting things that people talk about. So with a few seconds of looking at it, you could tell that this is fake, but it spooked the heck out of the market. And I think mostly it spooked the market because they were like, okay, we figured it out pretty quickly, but pretty soon we're not going to be able to. And mainly they were just scared by the implications of this, right. I think.
It was a risk aversion. They don't know what this means, even if it isn't what it appears to be.
We're never going to be able to trust anything we see again. Exactly.
Well, and when these fakes get really, really good, I mean, basically we're going to be in an arms race where the detectors are going to be pitted against the generators, and we're going to get to a level where no human is able to detect anything.
Fortunately, there's a much better way to actually distinguish between
them.
Well, hold on. Before we get there, I want to complete this dystopian picture of the world that's coming if we don't do something.
Certainly.
And I think it can be summed up in the following phrase: PIX and it didn't happen.
Yeah. You said something else. Everything is a psyop. Assume everything is a psyop
until proven otherwise.
Until proven otherwise. Exactly.
Until proven otherwise. And actually, go ahead.
Well, no, but PIX or it didn't happen. Like, how do you even...
I changed it to PIX and it didn't happen.
Right.
You have vivid PIX that prove it happened, and yet it didn't.
It didn't happen.
Right. It didn't happen. Right.
Yeah.
Right. But okay. So then if you teleport yourself into that world before you guys ride to the rescue with a technology that might save us from it, the problem is, okay, you can adapt to that world. How? Total cynicism, right? It's the psyop until proven otherwise. And the point is, do you really want to live in a world in which your eyes are incapable of telling you what happened unless it happened immediately in front of you? Right?
No, because the internet is the greatest library that's ever existed. And we just had a son, and I don't want my son to grow up without the resource of the greatest library that's ever existed.
Right. And in which basically it is a cesspool of nefarious claims backed up with evidence that even if your conscious mind can dismiss it, your subconscious mind will make whatever of it that it will make. And
exactly.
And it's like you said, it's like once you see it, you have forever seen it. You can't unsee it. And so wouldn't it be great if you could just make sure that those things never ended up in your feed to begin with? Right. But you could also know that those filters weren't being used nefariously to suppress information you wanted access to. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yep. Is there a technological solution to this that might lead us there, perhaps?
Yeah. So what's so funny about this is that to everyone inside the crypto industry, this answer is like plain as day, super obvious. I feel almost silly talking about it. But to everyone on the outside of the industry, it's like, what are we going to do? We need detectors because we're not going to be able to tell the difference between these kinds of images. We're going to, and are the detectors even going to be able to keep up? Blah, 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 blah. The very simple answer to this problem is public key cryptography. Fred Wilson wrote an article called Sign Everything that's extremely well written and just like very straightforward. If people want to read that, I recommend it. But basically what it means is that so public-private key cryptography uses key pairs. So the keys have a mathematical relationship.
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, before public key cryptography, we only had what's called symmetric cryptography. And this is what's been used since, kind of Roman times kind of thing, where the key that is used to encrypt something is also the key that is used to decrypt something. So you need to have a distribution mechanism for those keys so that whoever is on the other side is able to receive it and no one intercepts it in the middle.
Yeah, and if you and I sit down at a table and we take the alphabet and we agree that an A is a P, et cetera. And then you and I go our separate ways. I can send you a letter and you take your copy of the key and you decrypt it.
Decoder rings, exactly.
Yes.
And this was even used through World War II. And one of the major, if you ever saw the movie The Imitation Game, what it was basically talking about is they were trying to figure out a general computer that its purpose is to be able to decrypt the Axis messages because they were using cryptography, and they figured it out. They were able to decrypt them, and they didn't want to let the Germans know, so they couldn't give all these tells and stuff like that. But it enabled them to make strategic decisions to shorten the length of the war and to win the war sooner. And it was because they broke their cryptography, because they were dependent on symmetric cryptography. So one of the reasons that the web became one of the things that made Web 1 go into Web 2 was the introduction of TLS and SSL. Like why you have that little lock on your URL when you'd visit your bank. Now it's on every web page. Is it uses a combination of symmetric and asymmetric cryptography. The difference there is that, like Amy was describing, it involves a key pair, and we probably shouldn't go into all the details of this. Amy actually made a video about it. That's one of, obviously we make a lot of videos to teach this stuff. So if anyone wants to really, really get into this stuff, they should watch that particular video. But it depends on a key pair where you have one that is private and that you maintain and one that is public, and they are mathematically related to each other. And so anyone can, using just math, nothing else, be able to prove that if I put something out into the world that is derived from my private key and and I've also shared my public key, they can know with certainty that that thing was in fact derived from my private key. There is a one-to-one relationship that can't be faked by anyone else, et cetera. And you can't reverse engineer the public key back to the private key.
So people will have some experience with this, right? There was somebody in everybody's circle who used PGP. And there would be a large sequence of ASCII or extended ASCII characters at the end of it. And it would say PGP block begin, PGP block end. And if you weren't encrypting, you ignored it. But if you wanted to send this person a message that was truly private, you could use that thing. There was no
That's
risk
their public
of it getting
key.
to anybody. It was useless on its own. You could use it to encrypt a message that they had the decoder ring for on the other side. And those two things were generated in tandem at the beginning, right? The computer, you would give it some random inputs, move your mouse or something like that to give it some numbers that were not predictable from anything. And it would generate this pair of keys. And then your private version, you had to guard, and it was also guarded by a password that presumably it could be really hard not to write down anywhere. Right. And so anyway, that password allowed you to access your private key, which didn't mean anything to you either. It was only useful if you got a message that had been encrypted with your public one, and voila, a message could arrive. It didn't matter if it was intercepted because nobody could read it. And when you got it, you could open it up and decrypt it with your half of this thing. And not impossible to break it, but at foreseeable levels of computing power, the computing horsepower necessary to break it put it, what was it, tens of thousands of years in the future if you set a computer to the task of guessing, and it just kept
exactly. But like you said, it never caught on, right? There was like one person in your circle that used it because it was this kind of like onerous thing to do, to encrypt your email. It wasn't that hard, but it was just this extra step. It was super annoying. But then Proton Mail built it in to its software. And so now you and I can exchange emails just as we would on any other email software, only it's fully encrypted end to end.
Automatically, without you having to do anything extra. Right?
And that can be applied to this as well.
Right. Now, again, I really think, I hope that the crypto folks will turn the lasers off in their eyes for a little bit and just tune into this podcast and hear about the problem of all of these technologies. But the reason that PGP never caught on was not just that it was a little weird, right? Once you went through the process of generating the keys, it was easy enough. But the point is, okay, so let's say I have your key, Devon, and I send you a message. Very likely the next thing that happens is you're going to send me another key and say, could you encrypt that again? I no longer have the private key to decrypt that message you just sent me, right? That happens all the time because just
key management.
With cryptocurrency, you can lose access to stuff that you're entitled to have. And, so Proton Mail, I use it myself. It's a great example of what can be done. On the other hand, it now introduces the problem of like the crypto exchange, right? You are now dependent on Proton Mail being what it appears to be. Right. And that's an additional problem. So
I don't know. And you're dependent on because Proton Mail is maintaining the servers where your information is stored essentially. Right.
And most people didn't download a copy of their own private key. It's just stored. Exactly.
Right. And so while we all just take the leap of faith and trust that Proton Mail is encrypting everything end to end and they don't have any sort of backdoors into that and it is on their servers. And so if somebody were to subpoena the information on the servers, they wouldn't necessarily be able to access our information. That's all a leap of faith that we're making. And what we're talking about with Web3 is decentralizing the full protocol stack so that it's decentralized all the way down to the layer of the server infrastructure itself, right? There's a protocol called a cache that you can use to rent server infrastructure so that you're not necessarily using a single provider. And it's literally just decentralizing the server infrastructure itself. So we're in this weird time right now where most of us are still on Web 2. Web 3 is sort of being built, and the bridges from Web 2 to Web 3 aren't obvious and are being experimented on to see what makes it easy, what people like, what makes it, and even really what's necessary. So a lot of people are calling this like Web 2.5 because there are some apps that are out there right now where a piece of their app is decentralized, right? They're built on Arweave or they're built on IPFS. So they have this aspect of decentralization because they're decentralized file storage, but they're also, have a client that's hosted on a server so that you can just go to www.whatever and get to it directly. And that piece is still centralized because they're running it on Amazon Web Services because they haven't felt the pressure to decentralize all the way down to that server layer and have it hosted instead by a cache, for example. Because, building a new protocol stack where the app is decentralized, all the way down is a lot more work than what you're currently used to doing, just because these protocols are still being built essentially, right?
Yep. Well, let me just add one more thing before we move fully away from the sign everything. The extra layer to that, we were only talking about how to encrypt things so that they stay private. I'm sending it to you and only you can decrypt it. The other thing that you can do with this is I could take some message that I'm going to put out into the world publicly, and I can create a signature based on that message using my private key to decrypt it. And because my public key is available to anyone can use the public key to decrypt that signature. And what that tells them is the signature was generated based on the thing that I'm sharing, and it was generated by my private key and only my private key. So it's a way that I could put up a blog post or a video or anything else I want and attach a signature to it. And that signature is mathematical proof that the thing hasn't been altered since I signed it, that thing that I'm sharing the blog post or the video, and that I'm the one that actually shared it. And so that's the extra layer that we use in order to figure out that authenticity aspect of the stuff being shared on the internet, that especially as this fear is growing and especially as actual market impact is growing, there will become more of an awareness that this is the way to solve this, and thus we will adopt this new perspective of sign everything. If you want it to be perceived as authentic from your followers, from the public, from the government, anyone else that you want something to be perceived as authentically from you, you attach a signature to it. It's incredibly simple for you to do so, and anyone in the world can mathematically prove that it came from you, it didn't come from anyone else, and it hasn't been altered.
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And the thing about that is that he's making it sound like it would be this manual process that you would have to engage in. And what it is that you could use an app that's integrated that. And so that's what I was talking about, where wouldn't it be great if your feed could automatically be filtered so that you're not seeing any of the stuff, any of the garbage, but you can also audit those filters to know that they are not being used to suppress information.
Okay. I need help understanding some aspects of this.
Okay.
Something shows up in my feed. It appears to be a video of some event that would matter if it happened, but would be trivial to, with the help of AI, generate something that made it look like it happened and it didn't. Mm-hmm. What does this system do for me? I can look, suppose there's no signature.
Right. Don't trust it then.
I can filter it out on the basis that if it were genuine, it would have one.
Exactly.
Suppose it has a signature that's unknown to me.
That's only been used to sign one thing before. So again, what you know is this doesn't have the party that released this doesn't have any track record of trust in the past. So you can treat it as you want. Like some people might say, well, at least they signed it. They're starting to establish a track record, but I know that it's less trustworthy than the 1,000 messages that I know were published by Amy and all used the same key, the same public key. So I know all those came from her and she has a whole history of them. Whereas this one, that's a really huge event, it's signed, but by a key that's only been used once. So the person that signed it had no interest in establishing their past track record of trust. So we can go back to your picks and it didn't happen. Assume nothing is true. Assume everything is a psyop unless it's proven otherwise. The signature proves otherwise. It proves something. It gives you some piece of information.
So right. You're getting to the issue of trust. And just because something is signed and just because something is on a blockchain doesn't mean that it's trustworthy. And I think that gets conflated. So I'm really glad that you're bringing that up.
No, I get that it's not, you could put garbage on a blockchain and not only is there garbage on the blockchain, but it'll be there forever.
Right.
But it does allow me, if something's never been signed, I could set a filter that says, I only want to see things from sources that have signed 100 things or more that I can then go look at and see whether or not, it could have signed trivial things, 100
but
pictures
you can see
of a
them.
pen, right? And then I know, that doesn't strike me as likely to be worth trusting.
Much proof, right?
Or it could be somebody who has, documented some thing that I can otherwise verify. I don't know what the pattern would be that would suggest that this was a source.
I would say
would be unlikely.
Putting a signature onto your social media profile. Then as long as you trust that the tweets that are coming out of someone, if you've interacted with them on Twitter and you trust that it's them and they have created a loop between their public key and their Twitter profile or their Instagram profile or whatever, that attaches them to them. Like the person that has those keys also has the login information for that Twitter account.
Yeah.
This gets us some fraction of the distance.
It's that bridge, right, between Web 2 and Web 3. It's like, okay, well, what we have right now are these profiles on social media, and we assume that they are, who they say that they are. For the most part, it used to be that blue check told us that somehow the platform was involved in verifying and saying who that they said they were.
That you were dealing with a very high quality person.
That's no longer a filter because you can just buy that now. So, it is tricky. We're in a tricky landscape here, right? Are you going to put up, your ID along with your public key? Like, wow, that would be a lot to put out there. But you're right that we need these sort of steps along the way to give it that verification. There's other things that have been played with where it was kind of like what Devon was saying, when you can share your keys with friends and that they can help you to recover them. You can also do that with attestation of like, this person is who they say that they are. That was being done with land records at one point, was something we were working on.
There's like key signing parties where people get together and they show their ID to the other people that are having pizza with them and whatnot, and then they sign something. And so now if I have trust for all the statements you're making online and you attest that these 10 other people that you met at this particular event are who they say they are, then that increases my level of trust of them as well.